Hello, this is a brief overview of the new Q-Thing Mark II WAV player, polyphonic WAV player. This is the original Q-Thing, which is an MP3 player. It's monophonic, so monophonic means it will just play one track at a time. It's been polyphonic, it will play up to 14 tracks at the same time. And being a WAV player, it's better quality as well. So it runs on a micro SD card here, and this is an adapter for the micro SD card so that you can plug it into a computer. Micro SD card plugs into this slot here and contains all of the sound files and all of the programming for all of these buttons here to tell it what function essentially they're going to have. So functions can be pause, stop, play, next, previous, volume, things like that. There's a utility program for a computer that I'll cover in a later video, so you can see how all that works. You have a low level output here, which is designed to connect up to a PA system. A high level output here for headphones. That's your on, off and testing function. It tells you the expected battery life as well, depending on how bright that is. And here we have a fast test socket, which is to connect up the device to a computer when you're using the programming computer utility. So that gives you the ability to test the programming as you're doing it with a computer. So as you're laying out the programming for these buttons, which button does what, then you can test it effectively live. So this is what plugs into that. On this end you have a mini XLR socket that plugs into there, and then this end plugs into your computer USB socket. You don't need this cable in order to test the functions. It just makes it much simpler. So to test it without that cable, you would arrange all your programming on the computer. You'd write them to a folder on your computer, then you would load them onto your SD card, take the SD card out of the computer, put the SD card into here, and then test them on here. So this just gives you a bit more freedom, speed of use, flexibility, things like that. On here we've got 16 switching sockets, 8 down each side. Each of these switching sockets basically corresponds to each of these buttons. So plugging a sensor into this switching socket, which is effectively a contact closure switch, will do the same thing as pressing one of these buttons. So over here we've got a switch. So if I plug this into number 9, when I press that switch, it will effectively activate sound file number 9, or the function that I've allocated to number 9. And then here we have a tilt sensor. You might be able to hear that. Basically it's a ball bearing in a tube. So I plug that in there, and then if I tilt this sensor, then it will activate another switching socket. And here we've got a magnetic sensor. So if I pass a magnet over this sensor, that will close some contacts inside there and activate one of those tracks. Now those could be quite useful if you decide to wear this on your body. You could have it on a belt clip, and then you plugged in lots of sensors, and you've got various different sensors on your body. Maybe you've got a sensor in your hat, and then a tilt sensor in your hat, and then maybe when you tip your hat, then it fires off a sound. And then what you can do is connect this up to a radio mic system, a Sennheiser radio mic, via the Q-Link. So if you imagine you've got a headset microphone connected into here, you've got the Q-Thing connected to here, and then the output from this is connected to your radio mic transmitter. So you can have those three things on your belt, and then you can have the sensors on your body, you can have some in your shoes even, and then you can activate lots of sounds in lots of different ways through your radio mic system through to your PA. And on here you've got a volume control for this as well. So that's potentially very flexible, very useful for lots of performers in lots of different ways. However, you could, if you wanted to, you can access the sounds remotely just via a key fob. So you could have this perhaps at the side of your performance area, and then just have this on you. just a key fob with 4 buttons on it. So each of these connectors from the Q remote plugs into a switching socket. So we've got A, B, C and D. You might be able to see that written on there. And then when you turn on the Q remote, it means that when you press A, B, C or D on the key fob, it will activate switching sockets A, B, C and D. So if you've got a sound effect allocated to A, press A and it'll activate that sound effect. Let's say you've got a function allocated to button B, which is stop. Press B and it will stop. So if you might want to start track A, and then you might want to press B and it will stop the soundtrack. So that's potentially very, very useful, and you can have up to 4 Q remotes connected to the Q thing, because there are 16 sockets, so it's 4, 8, 12, 16, and the switching sockets you buy in groups of 4. They're all optional on the order form. And last we've got a mains transformer. So this means you can run the Q thing from the mains if you've got the mains available and you don't want to run it from the battery. So you'd take out the battery drawer, which has a 9-volt battery in it, put in a dummy drawer, and then you can select one of many different, there's a European one, different mains plugs which slide onto here, and then you plug that into there. Now it's running off the mains. So that's potentially very useful. If you don't want to use that, and you perhaps want some more environmentally friendly method of running it, you could use a rechargeable nickel metal hydride battery in here as well, which is a very good idea. This is an update for the latest Q remote and its key fob. It has slightly greater range than the old remote. I've tested this at over 50 metres. Its range will depend entirely on its operating conditions though, and you can find more information about that in the operating instructions. And also it's programmable for each of the outputs individually, which can potentially be useful. So if I turn it on and I press a button on here, the LEDs will illuminate to tell you that it's received a signal and it's responding to it. And also here we've got a very large button that can be paired to any of the outputs. So this could be handed out to an audience member and then they can interact with your performance, which is quite exciting for a lot of performers to be able to work in new ways. You could potentially have up to 16 of these operating your Q thing. So if you had 4 Q remotes connected to the one Q thing, you could potentially have 16 of these handed out to audience members, all controlling either an audio file or a function. So that opens up a whole new scope of possibilities for many performers. Okay, well that's a rough overview of the system, and then there are further videos that show it in use, and a video of the utility and how to use that.